Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Nadya's Entrepreneurial Corner. I am beyond excited. And I know I say that every single episode, but I have awesome people on my show. So that's why. To speak with Katherine Horrigan of the Dance Academy of Virginia, who has a very storied career in her past as a professional dancer and choreographer. She started her business during COVID, was able to grow it to 7 figures in a year. While other businesses were shutting down, she was growing this empire, and we're going to learn how she did it. But first, we want to get into some of her roots, because I've always been fascinated by people in this line of work having entertainment industry roots myself. So Katherine, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to talk to you and your audience today.
Amazing. And so tell us a little bit about your background. I understand you have over 2 decades of experience in dance. So where did this all start? Let's talk about first where you fell in love with dance.
Oh, thank you for asking. I fell in love with it as a young person. I must have seen dance growing up in my small town in Ohio. I was originally a competitive gymnast, so I was very athletic based and really disciplined and focused as a young kid, and saw dance and said, I need to do this. So for several years, I was doing both, training really intensely, and I knew at a very young age I wanted to be a professional dancer. So really blessed in that way to have direction in my life, and pursued it very intensely from a young age. And this required me to go away in the summers and train in intensive programs. I was classically based ballet, and then evolved into contemporary training. Moved to New York City for my undergrad work with Fordham University and the Ailey School, Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. So I received my BFA in dance there, and started performing professionally right from there. So networked in New York City through my undergrad years, and then became a dancer right after that, which doesn't always happen that way. So I was also, again, blessed to have a path immediately out of school. I danced with Ailey too, which is part of the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater Company. Toured internationally. I was on the road nonstop for many years, and performed with other companies based in New York City, Montreal. And then my last stop on my career was focused in Mexico. I danced with a company there in Mexico City. And part of the career is travel. So I was on the road most of the time, performing internationally, and living out of suitcases and on buses and planes, and never really having one home base for many years. So then I retired in my late 20s, early 30s.
Oh my gosh, that is incredible. And so what area of dance were you most involved with? Because it seems like it was maybe a variety of different things. You weren't niched down to one type of dance.
I was ballet and classically trained first, and then I evolved to contemporary dance with a ballet background. So the contemporary dance genre is very broad, and you can see dance companies all over the world, and they do very different work. We call it repertory. It depends on the choreographers that you work with, and the focus of the dance companies. So I kept evolving as a performer and as an artist, finding the ways in which I like to move, and the choreographers I like to work with, and the style of movement, and the quality of presentation. And so I found that I was looking for the experiences that developed process. So it's so interesting getting into how that transfers over into business. With dance, there's a long focus on discipline and practice, and over again repeating and developing a process, and going into detail and discovery and investigation. And I loved that. So working with choreographers that could really delve in and go deep on a subject, a theme, or on the movement. And so I just broadened my bases by traveling so much and working with choreographers and companies all over the place, that I was just hungry for it, and hungry for the experiences and the cultures that I was living in, and the people I got to work with and meet along the journey, working, in opera houses and festivals, and, different communities, Egypt, Israel, Japan.
Oh my gosh. What was your favorite country to travel to?
Israel and Japan were probably the top two. just beautiful cultures and people and lots to learn. And traveling as a performer, you get to adapt and adjust into the community even more so than I
Mhm.
would have as a tourist. So it was just so enlightening. And yeah, I grew so much learning so much about all these cultures and people. So that was a joy that came out of the work. And to answer your question, I think I broadened my horizons into contemporary dance so that I could explore more. I
Right.
thought that ballet was going to contain me and maybe limit me, and even my years of dance might have shortened, because the
Right.
more versatile you are in the career, the more opportunities you can have over time.
It's
So
also a little bit more physically grueling, right? To just be niched down to ballet, I would imagine.
it depends on your body and how you want to move and how it's best served for you. Yes, that's true. Contemporary dance is also very grueling. How I ended my career was three knee injuries. And
Oh,
so it's very physically heavy and intense. And you can repair yourself to a degree, but you get back out there and every day have to repeat what you just did. And so,
right.
we bang ourselves up pretty,
Pretty intensely. I don't
severely.
think people realize it's like, people think, oh, you're only going to get beat up if you're on the football field. It's like they forget about what dancers
No.
go through. And so you were doing this for a long time, and then you took a step back due to these injuries. So how did you transition into your world of entrepreneurship? Like, around what year did you officially retire? Like, I'm curious about the like number of years or months in between, like then, like those two paths.
I, you know, when I was injured, I was actually in Israel when I was injured, but I kept dancing for a while on the injury, which led to then my other knee. I had a meniscus tear and then tore the other one while continuing to work through it. So though I push through, it's not always smart to do so. And some of that's just survival. You want to keep going. You don't want to quit. You don't want to stop dancing. Taking time off is hard, and then you have to get back into it. So it took me a year to get my first surgery, and then I injured myself again during that time. So this was in my late 20s. So I had a good long run. I'm very grateful for, the length of my career performing. And I was also starting to be ready for the next phase of my life, may
Yeah.
settle down and transition into a more stable phase. So the injury was an opportunity for me to look at my life and see what was next. So I've had several transitions in my life, and I think that first beginning phase, knowing that it was coming, you need to prepare and develop other skills and other interests, but it doesn't matter. When you get there, you got to figure it out. You got to look at your life as a blank slate and see, well, where am I at today, and where do I want to be? But I was in a situation where I was based in Mexico, no longer in the States, been making pesos for years, very hard to transition back into the United States after a dancer's salary. And so I was starting over from zero, basically, and had to get resourceful and practical. And though I had entrepreneurial desires at that stage, I wasn't maybe in the situation, or I
Right.
thought I wasn't maybe in the situation to go for it at that time. Looking back, probably that was just a mindset block and a limiting belief
Mhm.
versus, if I'd really wanted to, I could have figured it out. But I went the traditional route, which was how I was brought up to be focused on education and pursue a career through systems and companies. So I went back to school to get my master's in arts management. And that was a way in which I could get into the business management side of the arts world through nonprofit work.
Right.
Um, I was very interested in business based on working in dance companies. I could see how the inner workings of them. And I always wanted to improve things, processes and communication and programming. And artists can sometimes do both really well, but not always. And so, it trickles down
Right.
into how organizations are messy. And I was always looking for ways to improve and analytically thinking of how it could be better. So I was curious and interested, got my degree in arts management. But as I was doing that, I transitioned into teaching full time. And
Yeah.
choreographing. With my ex-husband and I had a nonprofit dance company. So we were continuing to create work and bring in choreographers, commission choreographers on dancers and travel with them. Meanwhile, I started managing a dance school. So I got my practice in running someone else's business, a for-profit business, while I was doing all of these other things.
Yeah.
So I was interested in all facets of it and getting practical practice on the job. And I developed my skills as a manager through that time and learned so much about running a for-profit business. I was very interested in the inner workings of all of it. Working on the programmatic development side, but also on leadership and mentorship and coaching and back end marketing and sales and customer
You're like,
service.
wow, there's a lot to it. Oh my
There's
God.
so much to it. And once I would tackle one area, I'd focus on the next. And so I got to be in the mix for, 8 years running someone else's school and growing it while I was still running my nonprofit dance company.